understand this has more in it than just it has several recommendations in it. So listen very carefully to the whole thing. On July 7th, 2014, Carl Olson filed a petition for agency action requesting that the Iowa Board of Pharmacy recommend to the Iowa General Assembly the removal of marijuana from Schedule 1. The board first considered this petition at its August 2014 meeting. The board tabled consideration of the petition in August and appointed a special committee to further study the request. The committee met on November 17, 2014 and invited public comment on the petition. Numerous government agencies, advocacy groups, and private citizens provided both written and oral comments at the November 17th meeting. Both the committee and the board have thoroughly reviewed the petition and submitted information. On November 19th, the board is meeting in open session to deliberate and render a decision. It is the board's 2015 recommendation to the General Assembly that marijuana be removed from Schedule 1. The board does not make this recommendation lightly. The board's decision is based on two primary considerations. First, Iowa Code Section 124.203 requires that this board recommend the removal of a substance from Schedule 1 if the board finds, one, that the substance does not have a high potential for abuse, or two, that the substance has some accepted medical use and treatment in the United States. While the board believes that marijuana has a high potential for abuse, in 2014 the Iowa General Assembly passed the Medical Cannabinoid Act. That act permits the use of cannabidiol for patients suffering from intractable epilepsy. The passage of this act is an affirmative recognition by the Iowa General Assembly that there is some medical use for marijuana. Continued placement of marijuana in Schedule 1 is not consistent with that act. Second, marijuana is currently classified as both Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 controlled substance in Iowa. The dual scheduling is a holdover from experimental research programs authorized more than 30 years ago. The dual scheduling has understandably led to confusion as to this board's authority to promulgate rules authorizing the legal use of medical marijuana. The board does not believe it was the intention of the legislature for the board to unilaterally establish, design, and implement a medical marijuana program in Iowa. Removing marijuana from Schedule 1 and removing any reference to rules promulgated by the Iowa Board of Pharmacy will eliminate this confusion. In other words, we're asking for the elimination of the reference to the board. The petition does not request or suggest what schedule marijuana should be placed in, only that it be removed from Schedule 1. The board, however, believes it has an obligation under the Controlled Substances Act to recommend a proper schedule should marijuana be removed from Schedule 1. The board believes that marijuana is properly classified as Schedule 2. Iowa Code Section 124.205 establishes three criteria for the inclusion in Schedule 2. Marijuana meets each of these criteria as the board believes marijuana, number 1, has a high potential for abuse. Number 2, abuse of marijuana may lead to severe psychic or physical dependence. And 3, marijuana currently has accepted medical use with severe restrictions in the United States. The board wants to caution Iowans on both the limitations on this recommendation and the limitations of any rescheduling of marijuana. The board is not recommending legalization of marijuana or even legalization of a medical marijuana program in Iowa. The board is simply recommending that marijuana be reclassified as a Schedule 2 controlled substance. The board is further recommending, as it did in 2010, that a coalition of stakeholders be established to further study the potential medical uses of marijuana in Iowa, including further expansion of the use of the cannabidiol oil. These stakeholders should include, but not be limited to, the Office of drug control policy, the Iowa Boards of Medicine and Pharmacy, law enforcement agencies, academia, addiction treatment specialists, patients, and alike. It is incumbent that the establishment of any medical marijuana include the perspectives of all these groups, as no single entity can determine what conditions medical marijuana could be used to treat, what safety measures are needed to prevent the unlawful consumption of marijuana, especially by children and teens, and the myriad of other concerns raised by the potential establishment of a medical marijuana program in Iowa. This board, in particular, has genuine concerns about the ability of any program to establish the standardization of dosage and potency necessary to ensure patient safety and effective treatment. The rescheduling of marijuana will not automatically result in the legalization of medical marijuana in Iowa. Subsequent legislation will be needed, like the Medical Cannabinoid Law Act, to authorize this, the specific medical use of marijuana or marijuana derivatives. The establishment of any medical marijuana program will take sufficient time. The board acknowledges that this may be difficult to hear for many of Iowans who sincerely believe that medical marijuana will alleviate or even cure their or their loved ones' ailments. Finally, the board cautions that any state medical marijuana program may be suspended by the federal government, superseded by the federal government. Marijuana remains a Schedule I controlled substance under federal law. As a matter of policy, the federal government has allowed states to serve as laboratories of democracy and experiment with medical marijuana programs. This, however, is a matter of policy and not law. The federal government could change that policy at any time, thereby nullifying any action by the state of Iowa.